Profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning. Bear with me as I'm also being the technical person. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I can't see the gallery. It's not a lot of unfamiliar folks, but just in case there's someone new. My name is Sarah. My Dharma name is Dōjin. I use the pronouns she and her. And this is our weekly Stone Creek Dharma talk on Sunday mornings. And today I wanted to talk about a piece of, and I have been mentioning this, I think, in other talks recently, because it's been alive for me for a number of months. The practice that we have in Zen, where we dedicate the merit of any activity. So in terms of our formal and ceremonial practice, when we do things in Zen, when we come together and we generate merit by our intention and our coming together, we dedicate the merit of that. And usually we say, we offer it to all Buddhas in the 10 directions and the 3 times. And what I wanted to talk about today is the 3 times, which is past, present, and future. In fact, when we say that at Stone Creek, not everywhere I practice does that explicitly, but at Stone Creek, we say the 3 times and then we explicitly name past, present, and future. And what that means in terms of our practice, that this is a deep part of our tradition, that we account for the past, present, and the future. Lately, well, one thing that occurs to me this morning is that it's October 25th somehow. It's the end of October. And there's a lot of traditions that center around the liminalness of the end of October and beginning of November. And Dia de los Muertos is an example of that, and Halloween and its heritage is an example of that. The way that the people say the veil is thin between the realm of spirit and the material realm of our conventional reality. So that's one thing that's just alive for me about where we are right now, our present. And another is it's just that we are in a time of so much confusion and division, and the election is coming soon. Our son's birthday is November 4th. So it's always like he's all just gearing up for his birthday, and I'm thinking, oh my God, so many things are going to have to happen between now and then. And we're going to have to rally for his birthday, because really that is more important in his world. So here we are, in what should be fall, but it's extremely hot most days, and fires now, what we now call fire season, and with a lot of tension around, and a lot of exhaustion around, and a lot of I feel like maybe 4 different places in the last 2 days I've seen the words pandemic fatigue. We're all just in a place of having to negotiate this, and it's hard. And I'm often struck by how, no matter how deep our intention is, and how deep our commitment to practice is, and how much we want to heal and be a part of skillful activity in the world, it's harder when things are hard, it's challenging. And so I've been thinking often about how, what supports us to skillfully engage in the world. For me, practice is a really strong support, but what in that, what of practice actually, can I tease out and offer as a support for how we can care for this world and how we care for ourselves and one another, and actually interrupt the perpetuation of, pain, basically, and suffering. And the term that comes to my mind often is, well, support, like what supports us in practice and in our intention. And the other thing that comes to my mind is what puts us in the right alignment to live out our intention and our deepest held values. What supports us to be in alignment, and what keeps us from being in alignment. And a lot of the challenges we're collectively facing right now make it hard to be in alignment with our values. When we're exhausted, when we're stressed out, when we're disoriented. But for me, this practice of the 3 times of being accountable to the past, present, and future is really, it's a very vital one. I think when I came to Zen practice, I really was interested in the present. And the present is what, we work with always. It really is all there is. But I was interested in how that might cut me off from the past and what was painful in the past. And I think over time, for me, this practice of accounting for the 3 times means that we open to how the past and the future are not apart from the present. They're actually, they are right here. And in that, everything that we do really matters, actually. So to begin with, I want to offer actually this, it's a little bit of a repeat. I have offered this in pieces in different ways before, but I want to return to a few minutes of a meditation, a guided meditation. And I do know I've heard the feedback from many people who are interested in Zen or practice Zen that guided meditation is not everyone's bag. So for the next few minutes, I'll make an offering, and if you like, you can just sit zazen and tune my voice out. But what I wanted to offer was that we begin by arriving in the body and settling in the body, and just take a few breaths to actually feel ourselves here. One of the reasons we work with the breath and the body is that they are always functioning in the present. And the mind is often moving backwards and forwards in time, or imagining that it is. So we'll begin by being in the present, arriving in the body, attuning to whatever it is that's showing up for each of us today in our physical being. And understanding this effort itself as a kind of offering, as an effort that we're making for benefit, for enhancing the possibility for skillful activity, just showing up and accounting for our physical body. What's here? And then I want to offer that we can play with the mind's tendency to move around in time by making it deliberate. And from this place of our present, that we make the sense of past, present, and future actually very personal, not an abstract idea. And so we feel ourselves in the present, and we allow ourselves, maybe not cognitively, but more on the feeling plane, more on the plane of sensation, to open to the past and the people from whom we are descended, beyond our knowing. So not people that you know of, but people beyond what we can see. but we are in their lineage and we are the descendants of their activity. And so this may be our genetic ancestors, but it may also not be. In Zen, we pay a lot of attention to our dharmic ancestors, the heritage of Dharma in the world and the lineage of that. So it may be our dharmic ancestors, or just our karmic ancestors, people for whom their actions and decisions shaped each of our lives. We're on the receiving end of some benefit from their activity. And the invitation is more than an idea. Can you have a sensation of that? This web of connections that creates your life and my life. That we are not separate from. And we can have a few breaths maybe of gratitude for whatever we've received from those who came before us. The efforts that they made. And then the invitation is to take a breath and arrive again fully in the present. Feel the stability and materiality of your body. Have a sense of how this material being that each of us is includes all of that. And then equally allow your mind to reach into the future. And if possible, again, like beyond your reckoning, beyond descendants that you may know of, beyond influence you can maybe imagine. And feel that web also moving into the future. Decisions that each of us have made, efforts we have made, things we have done will impact people beyond our knowing in the future. And again, more than a cerebral idea of that, can you have a sensation of it? Can we have a feeling for the accountability that we have to those who come after us? And express our gratitude for them as well. For helping us align with the reality of how we're connected. And then when it works for you, just take a few breaths and come back into the present. If you can hear our dog is barking, that can help you back. A number of months ago, I gave a talk at the Houston Zen Center where this was in May, and they were spending the month talking about or focusing on ancestors. And in preparing for that, one of the things I wanted to offer in that talk was for each of us to think about what is our relationship to that idea or that word or ancestry in general. And to do that contemplation without judgment, not that any one of us should have any particular relationship one way or the other to our ancestry or heritage, but just to consider, like, what is it? When you were growing up, was that something that was emphasized or not? Or was it a cultural emphasis to pay attention to ancestors or not? Or somewhere in between? Many people are for different reasons cut off from a sense, particularly of genetic heritage. Our son is adopted, although he's lucky that his biological family is involved with us. So he's not cut off from his genetic heritage and the knowing of his story. But for many people, that wasn't true. For many people who are adopted, that wasn't true. For many decades, people were deliberately closing off adopted people from their heritage. For people that have ancestors who were enslaved, there was a deliberate cutting off from what came before. And for many people if you have, or if you yourself, or if you have ancestors in the past who immigrated to the United States, there was often a cutting off of cultural and familial ties and cultural practices and languages and all sorts of features of the past in order to assimilate. And I think it's a big feature of culture in the United States, this cutting off of the past. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for it. Assimilation is one of them, or that pressure or that movement towards assimilation that for some reason was emphasized. When I look for myself at how I was educated, which I now really understand to be educated in a very white bias of American history, or the history of the United States, there was a striving to have a heroic narrative in that's how I experienced it anyway, in the history of the United States. And because so much of the history of the United States is really not heroic at all, but is pretty extraordinarily violent and driven by greed and hatred and delusion, that history got pretty pared down, and shaped, try to make it into a heroic box that it actually wasn't, that a lot of the truth of it didn't get represented. And in that kind of created, in my world anyway, a dominant culture where the present was where it was at, and the past was something to really be moved beyond. I can see that in my own family actually too, that I was thinking about this today, that the economic constraints, so most of my ancestors that came here were coming here out of economic desperation, and some of it because of religious oppression. And my grandparents my great grandparents were all farmers and fishermen, and these were like, this was a hard way of life, you know. And the aspiration, I was thinking this morning how we call this the American dream. The aspiration was that each generation would have it easy, that the labor would be less, that the material prosperity would be more. That and in my family, education was really seen as the ticket, and it bared out actually in a lot of ways, but at the cost in some ways of yeah, this prosperity was at the cost of a lot of history and connection to the past, and a sense of who and what we are being really woven in with the past. We were supposed to transcend it. That was how I was taught. And because also experience in the United States, being acculturated as a white person, there's so much duality. There was also made like that, like a duality between the past and the present and the future as well. And this emphasis on individualism really cuts us off from the sense of how these things are connected. I think I may have mentioned this also in another talk, but I'm struck by it over and over again. That I was listening to a commentator who is actually a fantasy writer named Daniel Jose Older. I think he actually writes young adult books, and I believe he's Puerto Rican, and he was talking about this. He was musing about how in dominant white culture in the United States, ghost stories are scary, you know. So people who have died or having any relationship with spirits or ghosts is scary, or that's the vernacular anyway. And in his family and his cultural traditions, the ancestor altars and kind of a place in the home would have a sense of ancestors, and ancestor worship and connection is very alive. And he was laughing about how, like, you know, people in the United, so in his experience, folks who have assimilated into the culture in the United States, you know, mostly don't pay attention to this, but when things get hard, they call on their ancestors for guidance. And even though that wasn't exactly something I was taught, I think when I came into Zen practice, that feeling of referring to our ancestors for guidance was freed up in me. And that is available, attending to those in the past, those who have done, you know, not scary, but actually beneficent and guiding, and here with us and wanting us to not just continue all of the confusion and difficulties, but wanting us to evolve, wanting us to heal. And I was touched again on this same content. A dear friend of mine her son died this summer the day before his 21st birthday in a drowning accident. And she posted on Facebook that how it is for her this year as she's watching people around her neighborhood in Berkeley decorate their yards with spooky gravestones and spooky skeletons, and her deep changed feeling about cemeteries. She said, I never thought of cemeteries as spooky, and now I really don't. Cemeteries are places of love and care, where loved ones' bodies were placed with intention, where grief and confusion and love dance together. They're places we'll go to try to connect across the impossible gulf of time and space. Spooky reveals such a deep confusion about death and loss. Yeah. This is such a profound teaching from a grieving mother. And I think not just about death and loss, but about the past. I mean, in her case, it's her descendant who died, and that is a tremendously challenging thing to work with. But really, we all come from lineages of people who have died. We are made of them. So there's a lot, just like death is behind us, you know. And that may be one of the reasons why in our in the grasping and dominant culture for comfort and for I don't know, immediate gratification or other things, we don't want to deal with that because it reminds us that that's part of our life. I think there's a lot of reasons. But our practice asks us, you know, even in that simple act of the dedication that we may do by rote over, you know, thousands of times, if we, when we live in a monastic training set temple, we would do that like several times a day. All Buddha's 10 directions, 3 times. You would say it over and over again. You wouldn't even think about what you were saying, but there's that offering is there over and over again to wake up to the accountability that liberation lives where we understand how we are connected. When we come from that ground of how we are connected. And for me, it gives life to this feeling of stewardship, which is so different than ownership, you know, or possession that I was, again, that I feel like I was raised with. Stewardship is to understand ourselves as part of a stream, this like flowing stream of humanity. And right now, for each of us, because we're still living, it's our time to take care of the situation of being human, which includes this world. And I feel like we do that best when we are not in the abstract, but in our hearts and in our physical beings, having a sense of all that we've come from and all that comes from us. Not just genetically. I mean, it doesn't need to be genetic at all, but karmically. I do feel like we're about to, I feel the last 4 years as a kind of yucky blob, or a very difficult package, you know. And I was reflecting on about this time 4 years ago, there was a lot of like leading up to the election. And certainly in the weeks following, there was, in my experience and the community around me, there was a lot of disbelief. How could particularly about the presidential election, for a number of reasons, but I think part of it was like, how could someone who so thoroughly flouts conventions of, you know, just like decency and respect and even kindness, how could someone ascend to so much power in the United States? In the time, but even then I had this inkling, and I've been trying to work it out since then, but I feel like what it is that that's not an aberration. You know, people ascending into power who are pretty cruel and uncaring, it's not what many of us want, but it's not an aberration. It's actually, it's a distillation and a rising from our history that in some ways makes a lot of sense. People abusing power is like a definitional, foundational piece of the United States. People taking their views and using them to kind of run over other people is literally like how a lot of white people got to this land, you know. But if our relationship to the history and past is confused or cut off or not valued, we can find ourselves in this confusion. Like, how did this happen? And I think it is, in terms of our hearts and our values, it's great to question, like, what is all this violence, both like physical but also psychological? What is all this abuse of power? What is this legacy of people who really only care about a very small set of people? And then bring that into the light of our dharmic practice, which says that everything we do is for all beings all the time. Like, how do we reconcile those? How do we work with those together? It's very alive for me, this question of, like, what does it mean to practice Zen in the United States, in this culture, with this heritage? What are the pieces that we need to open to of the whole story of who and what we are? What, if we are raised here or not, and there's a big variability there. And even within anyone who's raised in the United States, there's a huge variability of culture. And still there's momentum of greed and hatred and delusion, of separation, of isolating people from one another, from the past, from the future. When we are told that it's okay to make decisions for a more immediate profit over the well-being of people in the present, over the well-being of people to come in generations, that's an amazing level of delusion. And in my experience in the United States, though, it's a teaching that often happens. Like, I've come to expect it. Like, well, of course that corporation made that decision to dump that toxic stuff. It was just more, it was a cost-effective measure. But lately I've been wondering if we can take the wisdom of our practice that says it's all right here. Our accountability to the past and our accountability to the future is right here. And have that support us to make different choices that have it shape our behavior differently. Like, why is profit so collectively valued? When did we all decide that was okay? Not to say that, we all had a say in that exactly, but when did we all decide that to buy into that enough that we wouldn't always be protesting when that was the choice over human beings' well-being, over the health of people, over the health of the planet? And I include myself, I include myself in the many folks, I think, who were schooled in a feeling of, like, this is beyond our control. People just will be this way. People just will be greedy. Corporations just will not listen. They will not care. But what if we really root down into our practice and then look at those things again and say, really? Because it could be different. We could decide, actually, that other things are more important than profit, than comfort, than a feeling of individualism. In the tradition of Zen, and including at Stone Creek, when we take the precepts, for those of you who have received the precepts, we receive these lineage papers. And for those who haven't seen them, the lineage papers are, again, like a distinctly important thing in Zen. And it's a teaching. And what it represents, so there's the Buddha's name at the top, and then the name of ancestors. And it's, they're mostly men until you get to Jisho and the ones at Stone Creek. Or for the ones that I have, they're mostly men until you get to my teacher, Galen, and then me. So that's a kind of, you see our collective heritage in that already. because there were plenty of women in the tradition of Buddhism from its beginnings. But the teaching is, we can so then again we can include that, okay, there was patriarchy and it had a big influence, and the teaching also is still there, that there's the Buddha's name and then this red line that goes all the way through all the ancestors to your teacher and to your new name when you receive the precepts. And then the line goes like this, from your name out around the back and up to the Buddha. So it's a teaching about the 3 times. It's a teaching about time is not linear. You're not at the end of that only. You are at the end of that long list, and then also you're at the beginning of it. And your efforts feed back into the Buddha. They make the Buddha manifest in the world. And they give life to this whole lineage. Every name that's on there and every name that's not on there that didn't get included. And I have seen those papers for many, many years. And somehow this year it's striking me, or in the past few months, it's striking me, what a profound teaching. What a profound teaching of alignment in the world about what we are and how to be in the world. So I just want to offer this encouragement to all of us. We have, it's been challenging. It will continue to be challenging. I want to offer the encouragement to hold tight, leading up to the election and through it and after it. And also the possibility that it may not be resolved as quickly as anyone would like, or that seems very likely. And that but our practice offers lots of deep treasures of alignment to meet times of challenge and to meet this very potent and strange juncture we're in that is full of reckoning from the past. All sorts of stuff that I think many of us would have liked to have thought were resolved, not being resolved, and asking for our care and attention. And that our best hope in terms of skillful action in the world is to take care with this very deep and personal sense of how we're not apart from all that's going on. And our responsibility is not just to us and the people close into us, but to the whole network of the web of connection, both in the past and in the future. Thank you. So please, if you'd like to ask a question or offer a reflection or comment, just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning, Sarah. Roberta here.
Roberta, are you unmuting? I can't hear you. Or let me make. Oh, yeah. Can other people hear Roberta? No, not yet.
Oh,
there he is. Okay.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. That was very touching to me. I worked years ago. I was privileged to be asked to work by my friend Vic Bedoyan, a radio producer with Native American people, Pomo people. And we worked with them for several years, gathering interviews, oral histories. And as you know, and most people do, Indians talk about relatives and relationships and ancestors all the time. It's part of their lineage, their storytelling, their way of being. And it was very enlightening for me to get that what I'd been taught in California schools was not really the truth about Native life. And mostly people are who they are in my experience with Pomo elders and younger people by their storytelling, what they laugh at, their humor, their connection to each other, their connection to their ancestors. And one of the things that I write about in my book that just came out, a new book, Lost Angels Coming Home, is about my experience with one elder woman, Annie Lake, who was 100 years old when we worked with her, and how her life was completely taken over by the white man. And when that happened, when she was a child, and being forced to live with people she didn't know, and all the different Indian groups were put together who spoke different dialects, etc. But one of the things that held her together, and what you talked about, and I love this, was the connection for her with her ancestry was still there.
Mm.
It's in nature, and may I present a radical view that we all need to remember what you spoke of today, to be part of our relationships and relations and ancestry. And much of that is to the earth. And I think that the lesson and what I was taught by Indian people in Lake Mendocino and Sonoma County was to go back to nature, be a part of the land, grow vegetables, grow gardens, care for trees, care for animals, care for each other. So I just want to put that out there, that there was wisdom still in the sadness and tragedy of these people's lives, but the wisdom was that we're still in relationship.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you. Yeah, I often think that, that and different cultures have this emphasis on our heritage being our genetic heritage, but if we open wider than that, we're all standing on this land, we're all living, I guess I don't know that everyone here today is in the United States, but most of us are. And we're on this land where actually we are the descendants of this heritage that we don't even know, right? And that there are teachings and there's wisdom in the land itself, along with the violence and the genocide and or the attempted genocide, and all of it. It's all here, and we actually, that's part of what we work with, and and that maybe the healing on this land also will need to come from those kind of indigenous wisdom that's still here, that comes right out of like the land itself and the people that were in closer connection with it than thinking that there was ownership or that there was simply something to make use of. This morning I was walking by a vineyard, and I was looking, and somehow it just struck me. I looked at the grapevines, and they're just so shackled, I know it's an efficient way to grow grapes and to get the sunlight to all of them, but they're all like bound to these wires and posts, and it just really spoke to me like, oh, it's just such a particular idea that I want to maximize what I get from that plant. It's a product, it's a thing that I get stuff out of. Just in the vineyards themselves actually speak to that being those kind of values. And I was just looking at one plant being like, well, what would it be like if you could be free? Like, would it help you if I just untangled you from that wire? Probably not. But, like what would the grape plants do if they just got to be grape plants, making their offering, not having to be shaped by us, so viciously, really. And I know it's been, centuries of that shaping, and still I think it's worth wondering, how to liberate even the grape plants. Are there a couple other thoughts?
Yeah, hi, Dōjin.
Yeah.
Good to hear
and then
you.
Michael, I see your hand.
You touched on a couple things that I connected with. One being the value of ritual in the context that you were speaking of the ancestors and the various forces in our lives that we seem like we're at the effect of, and try to make change. And so I think, you know, having an altar, whether it's just a table or, you know, a chair, whatever it is, a place to go to where you can speak, you know, your most sacred thoughts and feelings. And I live about 5 or 10 minutes up the hill from Stone Creek, and I've been here about 20 years, and I found 4 adobe bricks behind an old house that was on the property. And I took these adobe bricks and put them around a little outdoor sort of fire pit where I go for my ritual. And it's just to sit with those old bricks. Just there's a really beautiful feeling of grounding, and to just somehow feel the forces of those people that lived on the same place where I live is a really, it's just a grounding, beautiful grounding experience. And your comments about profit were spot on. I have wondered myself, like, how did we get here? Why did it evolve this way? You know, why is it that corporations can pollute waterways and not have to pay, and the cost is on the public? So I know we in this country we have particular virulent form of capitalism. I think there are other places I know, like Sweden, that they have less income inequality than we have. So in the context of the business structure, and I think that, you know, in our culture, it's not only the profit, but it's ego, and it affects the way we treat each other. You know, what are you worth to me? You know, are you a rich person? What kind of clothing are you? All that stuff. It's through and through our identity, and it can be difficult to separate ourselves from it. But I know it's always been meaningful to me to hear about other cultures that have a, you know, a less nasty form of capitalism. Anyway, good to be with you.
Yeah, and I would offer that you know, it's dominant culture in the United States. It's dominant culture values, you know, and that each of us in different ways are not all only that, you know, however much we've been impacted by it, we have other things that impact us and move us, and whether or not we're empowered to enact those or not. You know. Michael Little, did you have something to say? I think because you have the headphones on, we can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the fire that just came by caused us in our little home in Oakmont near Santa Rosa to move out for 10 days. And we came back to see the house was fine, the cat was fine. Most of our neighbors are fine. But one house that's up the hill from us belongs to a dear friend and his wife, and that got burned completely to the ground. So it's up the hill from a flat place, and then there's Route 12 going between Santa Rosa and Sonoma. And then there's creeks coming down the hill across the flat place under the 12 and in through Oakmont a little bit. And so it occurred to me, if as a way to help my friends who are doing okay. I mean, they're struggling, with all the apparatus of what do you do after a fire? You notify different commissions and institutions to help them deal with drainage after a burn. And I wanted to ask if anybody here knows of the woman who teaches, I've heard her on the radio once, POMO ways of managing forest fires. That's the question.
Great. I'm just looking to see if anyone's saying like, yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not yet, but maybe our collective mind can speak more information.
Well, I did check around yesterday for the officials, the Oakmont official, my friend who's in the Forest Service and so on. And the key question is, will the rain come soon before any runoff issues develop? And because the state requires, the state water and toxics managers require you to wait, and they're dealing with thousands of structures after these fires. So the wait is going to be very long. And both Rick and I are impatient to just start, doing the right thing to manage the runoff. But we're also really interested in how the answer, that was once a marsh where we live, and the drainage was channeled into the Santa Rosa Creek. And so there's a lineage
Yeah.
that we want to
like
know
how
about.
to respond with
Yeah.
the full spectrum of care, including the wisdom in the land.
Exactly. Thank you for understanding them. Maybe somebody will come across that person. I heard her on KPFA, so I can backtrack somehow.
Yes. Yeah. Good luck, and thank you for your engagement.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Okay. Let me put the closing chant in the chat. Oops. Hold on. That was going to go to Sharon, but now it can go to everyone. Okay. And we'll do the closing chant together. And I'm gonna mute the folks who had talked just so it doesn't have a lot of. Things are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize